Hi everyone. So the last time I posted about my container homes journey and the start of vlogging, I had quite some follow-up questions from a couple of friends or people in my social network who are asking me to share more information on container homes, and that's why I'm making this video today. I hope to shed some more light on the experiences that I learned. As you already know, if you followed that last video, I'm just beginning my vlogging journey. So if you see any errors in terms of the editing and my video shaking and all that, you just forgive me for that. The purpose of the video is really to share information rather than the optics, because I'm not a no seasoned vlogger. I'm just starting out and seeing what this journey looks like. So I did go around Nairobi, trying to find out more about container homes. I visited 3 companies in total, whose names I really won't mention. But if you're really keen, you can DM me and I'll share the information. Because I'll share my own insights and I don't want it to come out like, talking about these companies in any way. So the first company I visited, I didn't really like the quality of the interior, but I learned quite a lot. I learned quite a lot. So basically, that first, let me call it quote unquote interview that I had with that first company shed a lot of light on container homes and what they mean, and the costs of a container home, the actual real costs, and basically what it entails to set up a container home in Kenya. So by the time I was going to the second company, it was really more fact checking. I liked the interior from the onset, and I had basically gotten to a stage where I was almost signing a contract with them. I took a lot of content, videos, and all that during these sessions, but I won't share this because, again, like I said, I don't want to mention the companies at length. And then a third company I went to, who were doing quite massive projects within East Africa, shed even more light in regards to the affordability of container homes. So the first company, like I said, it empowered me with a lot of information. You know what a 20-foot container looks like, what can fit in there, what a 40-foot container looks like, what can fit in there. A 20-foot, basically, the smaller containers you'll see on top of the lorry, the trucks, and it can basically take a 1-bedroom or a studio, but it's literally 20 feet by 8 foot. So the width for all the containers is 8 foot. Another thing I learned is that when you open the doors for the containers, you can gain another almost 4 feet. So it could be 24 foot instead of 20 foot. And the width stays as 8 feet. Or a 40-foot container is basically 40, and then you can open the doors to make it 44 feet, and then by 8 foot. Okay, so the 20 foot can then be 24 feet, or the 40 foot can be 44 feet. It's an interesting detail if you embark on the journey. So after learning that, I started to work on the designs with the company that I was going to settle for. And in the end, one container was not going to suit my needs because I was looking like at a 2-bedroom basically. So the design was around a 140-foot container and a 120-foot container. You can check these things online. A lot of people, like in Europe, in US, are doing quite a lot on container homes. So if you just do a quick search even on YouTube, you can find people really designing very amazing container homes. One thing that struck me is that if one is going on a journey of getting into a container home, getting a container home, they sell it as an affordable housing, But really, in my view, after everything after all the research I've done, the talking to the different suppliers, the contractors, it is not an affordable housing opportunity. It could actually be more expensive to have a container house than going the brick and mortar way, for two reasons. The first thing is that because of the size that I mentioned, if you're looking at a 20-foot and a 40-foot container to create, like, an L shape or whatever shape, you can just check the different designs online. AI can also give you like different, variations of, or, just different design approaches. You quickly realize that in the end, you have like about 50 square meters of space. And if you compare the pricing of fabricating that house, the 50 square meters, 50, 60, whatever the case may be, if you put like a gap in between the containers, there are really nice approaches that one can take. In the end, if you compare the cost with having a brick and mortar house, you'll be shortchanged. This is for someone like me who was looking for an affordable housing. In the end, it was not affordable, because if you do 1-to-1 with square meters using brick and mortar, and you stick to everything, the interior, the square meters, everything, you'll be shortchanged. It could be cheaper if I, for example, bought the containers and fabricated them myself, maybe with a local fundi or something like that. But it will take longer. This is something, again, that it's not easy to see right off the bat. It will take longer to do that. So again, the number two bit is the speed. They sell the container home basically as sorry, I just had a little bit of interruption. So in terms of square meters, it will be short. One will be shortchanged. Let me just say that I felt shortchanged. In terms of speed, again, if I'm going to fabricate it with my local fundis, because you'll need to do the before doing the plumbing, the electrical works, there's the paneling of the interior. There's a lot of work that goes into it, obviously, to make it a home. So if one does it with the local fundis, then it might take longer sourcing for the materials, sharing the design concepts and all that, picking the type of tiles, gypsum, all these things that one wants to do, one wants to have, basically. So when I looked at working with a contractor to do the very nice design of the house I wanted with 2 containers, and the speed that they were going to move and the cost, compared to using brick and mortar, which is what we use basically in Kenya and in my region. I know there are other places where, when I say brick and mortar, I mean using stones and cement. And there are other people who use bricks, I guess, in the western side of Kenya, which is more affordable and available. But whichever the case may be, it was cheaper to do the traditional construction compared to container homes. That being said, I really did love the concept of container homes. It's just that it was no longer practical for me after all the information I got. So the third company I visited, they do luxury containers, and this is where it all made sense for me. Say, for example, I want to do an Airbnb in an exotic place, or in places like Nanyuki, where they have all these nice cottages and different designs, or I don't know, in Laikipia, these places where even foreigners would love to come and visit and stay during vacation. Then it makes a lot of sense, because it's one of the attraction points. It's you can call it an eco lodge, you can say you're using recycled materials, blah blah blah. But for living, it has to be someone that first knows what they're doing in terms of interior designing, or even an architect, whoever, contractor doing this for themselves. And second, there is not really cost savings. Because they're modular, one can say that I'll get one container, which is around 200,000, 250 thereabouts for a good enough container, and then make it into a studio, place it somewhere, say if it's a plot of land in Gong or whatever, but keep it very basic, very, very basic. Then it will be a 20-foot by 8-foot container. That's a studio. If you use brick and mortar, I can almost bet to be cheaper because the container, the cost they build up really quickly, and it might come to around 750, 850 if you look at what the market prices look like for using the companies that do this type of fabrications, because of course they'll put their profit margin and all that. Compared to just using stone and cement, to me, honestly, it seemed cheaper to go the traditional way. I'd rather even do a house with iron sheets, which would be now the cheapest, iron sheets and timber, then, build up from there. So I'm following quite a number of people online on YouTube, and I can see why they settle for some certain type of homes compared to going the container way. I also follow some content creators who are doing their own container homes, which is really impressive. But if you notice, they they design and fabricate the container homes themselves. I think that's a catch. And then of course there's the ones who are featured with very beautiful container homes. And then the positive here is that first, it stands out. Second, if it's to be, like a tourist attraction point, that's a tick, because who wants to, you tick, because who wants to come and see a cemented house? There's nothing attractive there. Rather, it will just be a typical vacation. But if you can say it's a container home, well furnished, all that, it's attractive in itself. It's like going to a log cabin or something, different attraction points there. The third thing is, if one is looking at a mobile home, again, it's not as easy to uproot your container home and move it to different locations, because every time you do that, something will get damaged. And I've seen it even in some of the container homes that are being fabricated in these different sites for the different companies. And you'll see that the gypsum has fallen off, or there's a crack, I don't know, on the wall, not the container wall, but the interior or something. So you'll still incur some costs in doing what? In repairing that damage. But maybe it's still, of course, cheaper because you cannot uproot a cemented house, obviously. So there's an advantage to that. But for the two things I was looking out for, that was affordability and speed, I was not gaining any of that, any of the two, because on the speed side, many of the companies were quoting about 60 days to get a container house fully completed, and the foundation at the site to be done, and up to commissioning. So about 60 working days. I felt that one can achieve almost the same timelines if you have a good contractor building a traditional house. So I'm sorry to disappoint. In the end, I did end up settling for a typical traditional house. I also looked around for, experiences and possibility of using precasts. I think that will be a story for another day as well. I was not convinced, and maybe I didn't look hard enough because it was not my go-to. But I think my overall learning, the lessons here, is that there's really not one way to build a home that is low cost. It's really about the cheapness or the expensiveness of the materials that are used. And even then, the savings are, it will not be more than 30%. And the pros and cons, that's really important to weigh. So if, for example, I want to go for a very typical traditional cemented house with no luxurious anything, it's easy to keep the cost very moderate, very, very moderate. But if I want to go for a container home, the costs are fixed, but I'm not going to save so much. And the space is very narrow, because look at the typical container, the space is very, very narrow. So in the end, if I was to build such a narrow cemented house, I'd probably use less money for that, considering the cost of stones, sand, all that. Really, like a cemented house can be brought up, one can build a cemented house that is 40 foot by 8 foot in a matter of days, including plastering, foundation, everything. When you just think about it, it's better to just go the cemented way, in my view. But yeah, happy to hear your comments. I can share any more details about these companies that I visited. They are very interesting projects that they're doing. It just wasn't for me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going the container way. I would definitely do it if I had money to spare, and putting up some cabin out in the off-grid area and all that. It will be an interesting project to take up, but for now, it didn't suit my interests or what I was going for in this phase of my life. All right, thank you. Bye.